There was a moment, a specific, crystallized moment, that changed everything. I walked up to the first woman with a clipboard in my hand and sweat running down my palms. My heart was beating harder than it should have for such a simple question. I knew this little experiment would either give me answers I had been searching for or end with me embarrassing myself in public. I took a breath and asked, "Excuse me, can I ask you an anonymous question for a research project?" She looked at the clipboard, raised an eyebrow, and then nodded. I asked the question that had been haunting my mind for weeks. What's the number one thing that genuinely turns you on about a guy? She paused for a moment, smiled slightly, and gave an answer that made me rethink almost everything I believed about attraction. That conversation was only the beginning. 6 months later, after speaking to 400 women in parks, cafes, bookstores, gyms, bars, offices, and even grocery store lines, the pattern I discovered completely destroyed the dating advice most men grow up believing. Most of us grow up hearing the same ideas repeated over and over again. Be confident, be funny, be mysterious, get money, look good. Those things sound reasonable, but something strange kept happening in my own life. I would sometimes do everything right according to that advice and still get rejected. Other times, when I was not trying at all, women seemed naturally drawn into conversation. It felt random and confusing. That confusion reached its peak the night I experienced the most humiliating rejection of my life. I was at a crowded house party, the kind where music is just loud enough that people lean closer when they talk. I started a conversation with a woman named Jessica. She had a warm laugh and an easygoing personality. For almost 2 hours, we talked about travel, music, college memories, and random childhood stories. She laughed at my jokes, touched my arm while speaking, and stayed close even when other people tried to pull her into different conversations. Every signal I had ever read online suggested she was interested. Eventually, I asked for her number. She looked at me kindly and said something that burned into my memory. "You seem really sweet, but I'm just not feeling that spark." Sweet. That word echoed in my head the entire drive home. I had spent hours being charming, funny, and attentive, and somehow I had become the nice guy she did not desire. That night I realized something uncomfortable. I had no idea what actually created attraction. I had been guessing. I had been copying what movies showed, what friends claimed worked, and what random articles suggested, but none of it seemed reliable. So, instead of guessing anymore, I decided to ask women directly. That is how the clipboard experiment began. At first, the answers were predictable. The first 50 women gave responses that sounded like textbook advice. Confidence, humor, ambition, kindness. Those qualities make sense, and they certainly matter in relationships. But something interesting began to happen around conversation number 60. Instead of describing qualities, women started describing experiences. They talked about specific moments when something shifted emotionally. Those stories fascinated me. One woman named Rachel told me about the exact moment she realized she wanted to sleep with someone she had just met. She said they were at a crowded rooftop bar, and she mentioned something about her job. Instead of interrupting or trying to impress her with his own story, the guy simply listened carefully and asked a thoughtful question about something she had said. She said the way he looked at her felt different from most conversations she had experienced. "It felt like he could actually see me," she explained. "Like he wasn't trying to impress me or win me over. He was just curious about me." That moment, she said, created a strange feeling she described as electric. She found herself thinking about him for the rest of the night. Another conversation that changed my understanding happened during survey number 127. I met a woman named Rachel outside a coffee shop. She described a man she had met during a group dinner. According to her, he was not the most attractive guy at the table. He was not the loudest or the funniest, either. But she remembered something about the way he focused on conversations. When he spoke with her, he was not scanning the room or checking his phone. He gave his full attention. "It felt like I was the only person there," she said. "Not because he was trying to impress me, but because he genuinely did not care about impressing anyone else." That sentence stayed with me. It hinted at something deeper than simple confidence. As I continued my experiment, I started noticing patterns everywhere. Some men naturally created this feeling without even trying. I began observing them closely in social settings. One evening at a small bar, I watched a quiet guy sit down next to a group of women. He did not start with jokes or flashy stories. Instead, he simply joined the conversation calmly. Within minutes, the women were leaning toward him, asking questions and laughing easily. The strange thing was that he was not performing in any obvious way. He just seemed comfortable being exactly who he was. Survey number 203 brought another breakthrough. I was speaking with a bartender named Alex after her shift. She described one of the most memorable hookups she had experienced. He was not even the best-looking guy, she admitted, but when he looked at me, it felt like he could see straight through me. She paused and laughed at her own words. It made me want to show him more about myself. That phrase revealed something important. Attraction was not about showing off impressive qualities. It was about creating a space where the other person wanted to reveal themselves. The deeper I went into this experiment, the clearer the pattern became. Women repeatedly described a moment when a man's presence changed. They used phrases like sudden shift, lightning bolt, or gravitational pull. According to research by biological anthropologist Dr. Helen Fisher, romantic attraction activates specific brain chemistry related to dopamine and norepinephrine. These chemicals create excitement, focus, and intense curiosity about another person. But the surprising thing is what triggers that state. It often happens when someone feels both seen and emotionally safe at the same time. Survey number 312 gave me one of the most powerful examples. I spoke with a nurse named Emma, who had recently ended a long relationship. She described meeting her ex-boyfriend on a terrible day at work. One of her patients had died, and she was emotionally drained. She expected the man she was talking to that evening to try cheering her up with jokes or distractions. Instead, he simply listened quietly and said, "That sounds really heavy." Then he sat with her in silence for a moment. "Most guys try to fix things immediately," she explained, "but he just gave me space to feel what I was feeling." She laughed awkwardly and added something surprising. "Something about that made me want him in a way I did not expect." That story challenged a common belief many men hold. We assume attraction is created by excitement and high energy, but many of these women describe desire emerging from emotional steadiness. A man who can remain calm and present when someone else is vulnerable signals strength in a very subtle way. Research confirms that for many women, desire is a response to feeling safe, seen, and emotionally close to a partner. Emotional safety, connection, trust, affection, communication, and mental closeness all influence how desire develops and how intimacy is experienced. Another memorable conversation happened during survey number 358. I was talking to Sarah, a marketing executive, about the most intense attraction she had ever felt. She described meeting a man at a wedding reception. While everyone else was networking, bragging, or trying to appear impressive, this man seemed completely relaxed. He was not trying to dominate conversations or prove his status. When he spoke with her, his curiosity felt genuine rather than strategic. "It felt like he gave me permission to want him," she said quietly, "because he did not need me to." That sentence captured the central lesson of the entire experiment. Sexual attraction often appears when someone feels a strong sense of self-sufficiency. A person who is comfortable in their own skin creates a different emotional atmosphere. They are not chasing approval or validation. Because of that, the interaction feels freer and more authentic. However, understanding this idea intellectually is easier than living it in real life. I discovered that during the final stage of my research. By the time I reached survey number 400, I thought I had fully understood the pattern. I tried to imitate this calm confidence during conversations, but a woman named Maya quickly saw through it. After a few minutes, she laughed and said, "You seem like you are trying really hard to look like you are not trying." That moment taught me the final piece of the puzzle. Presence cannot be performed. Non-neediness cannot be faked. People sense authenticity with surprising accuracy. The number one thing that repeatedly appeared in my research was simple but powerful. Women felt the strongest attraction toward men who were genuinely comfortable with themselves, not arrogant, not performing confidence, just steady and self-contained. One participant summarized it beautifully. She said, "It is like he has his own gravity. You want to get closer, not because he is pulling you, but because the space around him feels alive." After finishing the surveys, I spent 3 months applying this understanding to my own life. Instead of trying to impress women, I focused on being present in conversations. I paid attention without trying to steer interactions toward outcomes. Something interesting happened almost immediately. Conversations became easier. Women who had previously seemed distant began engaging more naturally. Some even started initiating contact themselves. The ultimate test happened months later when I unexpectedly ran into Jessica again, the same woman from the house party who had once called me sweet. We ended up talking for nearly 2 hours, but this time the dynamic felt different. I was not trying to impress her or win her approval. I was simply enjoying the conversation. When I eventually asked for her number, she smiled and said something that surprised me. "I was hoping you would ask. You feel different now, more solid." That moment confirmed everything the experiment had revealed. Attraction is not created by clever lines or complicated strategies. It grows from genuine self-assurance and presence. When someone is comfortable with themselves, conversations stop feeling like performances. They become real exchanges between two people. And that authenticity is often what makes someone unforgettable. The philosopher Seneca, one of the great Stoic thinkers, observed that silence is a lesson learned from the many sufferings of life. It is not something that comes naturally. It is something that must be cultivated through experience, through discipline, through the willingness to sit with discomfort rather than running from it. And when a man masters presence, when he learns to be fully in a moment without needing to prove anything, he becomes a force that few women can resist. The Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius advised that the best cure for anger is silence. But silence, in this context, is not just about withholding words. It is about withholding the desperate need for validation. It is about being so comfortable in your own skin that you do not need to fill every silence with chatter or every moment with performance. That kind of presence is rare. And rarity, as any economist will tell you, creates value. One of the women I interviewed, a therapist named Patricia, gave me a framework that helped me understand this even more deeply. She said that most men confuse confidence with performance. They think confidence means being the loudest, the funniest, the most impressive person in the room. But true confidence, she explained, is not about being seen. It is about being comfortable with not being seen. It is about knowing your worth so deeply that you do not need external validation to confirm it. She said that women are incredibly sensitive to the difference between performed confidence and genuine self-assurance. Performed confidence feels like a sales pitch. It feels like the person is trying to convince you of something. Genuine self-assurance, on the other hand, feels like a quiet invitation. It does not demand anything from you. It simply is. And that, she said, is what creates the space for attraction to grow. Another woman I interviewed, a yoga instructor named Elena, described attraction as a kind of resonance. She said that when a man is truly present, when he is not trying to be anywhere else or anyone else, his energy becomes coherent. And coherence, she explained, is deeply attractive. It feels safe. It feels grounded. It feels like something you can lean into without fear of it collapsing. She said that most men are so fragmented, so divided between who they are and who they think they should be, that their energy feels scattered. And scattered energy, she said, is the opposite of attractive. The philosopher Epictetus, another great Stoic, taught that no man is free who is not master of himself. And mastery of the self is exactly what this comes down to. When a man is constantly seeking approval, constantly trying to impress, constantly performing for an audience, he is not free. He is a slave to the opinions of others. And that slavery is visible in every interaction. It shows up in the way he laughs too hard at jokes that are not funny. It shows up in the way he agrees with things he does not actually believe. It shows up in the way he cannot tolerate silence without filling it with words. Women are not just perceptive. They are finely tuned to these signals. They have spent their entire lives reading social cues, assessing safety, and evaluating the emotional states of the people around them. They can feel the difference between a man who is grounded and a man who is grasping, and they are drawn to the grounded one every single time. The philosopher Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, taught that the goal of life is to live in agreement with nature. And it is human nature to seek connection, but it is also human nature to protect oneself from people who feel unsafe. A man who is desperate for approval feels unsafe. He feels unpredictable. He feels like he might turn on you if he does not get what he wants. A man who is grounded, on the other hand, feels safe. He feels steady. He feels like you can trust him because he is not trying to get anything from you. One of the most striking interviews I conducted was with a woman named Diane, a retired teacher in her late 50s. She had been married for over 30 years and had watched her daughters navigate the modern dating world with a mixture of fascination and concern. She told me that the biggest mistake she saw young men making was confusing attention with connection. She said that her daughters would come home from dates and describe men who had done all the right things, said all the right things, but left them feeling empty. And when she asked them why, they could never quite put it into words. She said she had watched this pattern repeat itself for years. The men who were most successful at attracting women were not the ones who tried the hardest. They were the ones who were the most comfortable in their own skin. She said that when a man is truly comfortable with himself, he does not need to prove anything. And that lack of need, that freedom from the desperate hunger for validation, is what makes him irresistible. Another interview that stayed with me was with a woman named Olivia, a graphic designer in her early 30s. She described a man she had dated briefly who had completely changed her understanding of attraction. She said that from the moment she met him, she felt an unusual sense of ease. He was not particularly handsome. He was not particularly wealthy. He was not particularly charming in the conventional sense. But there was something about the way he moved through the world that made her want to be around him. She said that when he looked at her, she felt like he was actually seeing her, not just looking at her. And that feeling, she said, was intoxicating. She said that most men look at you like they are trying to figure out if you are worth their time. He looked at her like he was already sure she was worth his time, but he did not need anything from her. That lack of need, she said, was what made him so compelling. The philosopher Cleanthes, who succeeded Zeno as the head of the Stoic school, wrote that the fates guide the willing, but drag the unwilling. A man who is willing to be present, willing to be himself, willing to let go of the desperate need for validation, is guided toward genuine connection. A man who is unwilling, who clings to performance and approval-seeking, is dragged into frustration and loneliness. The research I conducted over those 6 months was not just about understanding women. It was about understanding myself. Every interview, every conversation, every story I heard forced me to confront my own assumptions and biases. I had grown up believing that attraction was something you earned through effort. You worked hard, you said the right things, you presented yourself in the right way, and eventually you were rewarded with the attention of the woman you desired. But what I discovered was the opposite. Attraction is not something you earn, it is something you allow. It is not about doing more, it is about being more. It is not about impressing, it is about being present. When you stop trying to earn someone's attention and start simply being present with them, something shifts. The pressure evaporates, the performance ends, and what is left is a genuine connection between two people. That connection, more than any clever line or impressive achievement, is what creates lasting attraction. The philosopher Musonius Rufus, a Stoic teacher who profoundly influenced Epictetus, wrote that we should not use our words to command, but to persuade and to teach. And the greatest persuasion, I learned, is not about convincing someone of your worth. It is about creating a space where they can discover it for themselves. When you are genuinely present with a woman, when you listen to her without an agenda, when you are curious about her without trying to impress her, you create a space where she can feel safe enough to be herself. And in that space, attraction can grow naturally. It does not need to be forced. It does not need to be manufactured. It simply emerges. That is the lesson I learned from 400 conversations. That is the lesson I want to share with every man who has ever felt confused about why some men seem to attract women effortlessly while others struggle despite their best efforts. It is not about looks. It is not about money. It is not about the perfect pickup line. It is about presence. It is about being so comfortable in your own skin that you do not need anything from anyone else. And that, more than anything, is what makes you unforgettable. If this video helped you in one way or another, please consider supporting the channel using the Super Thanks feature. Your support means a lot, and it helps us keep creating better content specially for you. Every contribution goes directly into improving the quality of these videos and bringing you more of the Stoic wisdom and psychological insights that you have come to expect. If you learned something today, share your own opinion and observations about women in the comments section below. Take care, my brother. Stay grounded, stay present, and I will see you right here in the next one.